So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Elevenses. And we have a relaxed panel this morning over the hour with three data stewards in the UK, where we talk about what we love about data stewardship and focus on the resources we love to use. So anyone on the call is welcome to put questions into chat for the panel or raise their hand and join the discussion. So we did a Halloween panel last year, and we operated in this way. So people started to turn their cameras on and join the conversation. We absolutely welcome this. I have just shared the minutes in chat. I'll share them again in a minute. So please enter your details as attendees if you would like to, but also try to access the resource spreadsheet that I've highlighted in yellow within the minutes and add to this. So we really want to crowdsource during this session and see what resources you commonly use and rate highly. So what are the resources you find useful in your job? And we will share these after the call with people. So note, you don't need to put your details into this spreadsheet, but do also note that this document is public and linked from these public minutes. So in our Valentine's panel today, where we are talking about the resources we love to use, we have Munazah from the University of Manchester, we have Liz from Cardiff University, and we have Angus from the Digital Curation Centre and the University of Edinburgh, who, amongst other things, now administer the Research Data Man mailing list. So thank you for being here. I wanted to start off asking people how they got into data stewardship, because at least when I started working, the role didn't really exist, or at least wasn't visible in the way it currently is. So Munazah, we've worked together within ELIXIR for a number of years. How did you come into your current role?
So very interesting. I was working as a postdoc, and I was at that point in my career where I had to decide whether I have to do young PI applications or I want to change. So I was not enamored by this cycle, getting into the cycle of if you don't have a research grant, you don't have a paper. If you don't have a paper, you don't have a research grant. So that did not enthuse me. I was a bioinformatician and mostly doing analysis, data analysis. So I was not actively looking to be a data manager. So I was looking other ways of getting out, to getting out from active research into something else. Maybe, to be honest, I was looking for clinical data management kind of roles because they were around us in the university. And then in our department, the first position of research data management ever in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health of the University of Manchester was advertised. And actually, one of the professors who was involved in it asked me if I was interested and I could be a good fit, because I was anyway speaking to the hardcore experimentalists, and then also talking to computational biologists and computer scientists. So I kind of knew the jargon. That's how I started. But the interesting thing was, because it was the first position, everything was very slow. So I would I would write an email and then wait for days. So for the first 4 or 5 months, I did not feel bored because I was trying to finish my previous work, write my papers up and everything. But the latter 4 months, I was like, what have I done with my life? How did I end up here? I think we all know a postdoc's life is a 12-hour job. You're working, you're there in the weekends. And I enjoyed it for some time, and I went to the walks in the park and etc. And I got a bit worried. Then I got fed up with it. I thought I've made a wrong decision. And then just this new job that I'm currently in, it came up. Again, it was very loosely defined. It did not even say data management. It said about something about FAIR principles, something about training, something about communications and communities. Something which, as a postdoc, was very new to me because we don't do these sorts of things when you're a postdoc. I was just usually glued to my computer doing my analysis and, very, very limited space. What attracted me to the job is because now I regret it because they often hold me to it, is it said 40% travel. And I said, okay, it's better than getting bored and sitting in an office and shouting at people to please get things done. So that's my whole story, how I got into this, and the rest is history. But one thing I would like to point out, before my first research data manager interview that I did for the University of Manchester, I had no clue of FAIR principles.
Yeah.
Although I was a bioinformatician, although I was doing analysis, but because I was in an experimental group, the focus was very different. So I came across the FAIR principles when I prepared for the interview for the job. Yeah, so that was my story of coming here very accidentally.
Yeah, that sounds very much like my own story where, you're in research, but I didn't really want to be in research. I'm really a lot more interested in the support of this. I mean, Liz, I know you from Cardiff, and you're very much sort of leading in the human data space in the university, but I believe you've got a background in clinical trials, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I started to work in clinical trials in the noughties, and it's back in 2007, so it's a long time ago. And it's when the clinical trials regulations just came into being. And I don't know how many people on the call kind of work within clinical trials or with human data, but clinical trials is a really highly regulated environment to work in, and you have to have a lot of systems and processes involved with how you're collecting, how you're approaching patients, how you're collecting data, how you're handling that data, what you do with that data, how you then report it to the MHRA, who are the regulatory body, and how you retain that data. So I came from, and I worked in clinical trials for about 13 years or something like that, probably longer. And I worked as a quality assurance manager. So in that time, setting up processes, making sure people are doing all the things that they're meant to be doing. And within a clinical trial, there's so much detail involved, and people need so much assistance to make sure they're doing it correctly, because they will be, they're answerable to the regulators. On a really quite a live basis. Is very different, clinical trials is, as opposed to just getting some data and just doing some analysis. It's all very current how you're handling stuff. You have this constant discourse with the regulators. And so I did that for 12 years, and I worked in clinical as a quality assurance manager, and then I moved into an internal audit. And it was really good to be an internal audit, but nobody likes you because you're finding problems with their work. And what you're trying to do as an auditor is trying to make stuff better, but people don't see that. They just think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be audited, and it's quite stressful. But the idea is that you're always improving what you're doing, making it better for next time, understanding if there's any problems with things. And there's a real balance, and you have to be a real human when you're doing audit. You have to have real empathy with why people have made mistakes or what the problems are, understanding them and working with people to kind of make sure it's right in the future and make sure mistakes don't happen in the future. So I did that for a couple of years as well. And then I needed to get my teeth into something slightly more exciting. So I kind of then I moved into kind of working in cancer and genomics and stuff, and working with a bunch of bioinformaticians. So kind of went from a really highly regulated environment to an environment where they haven't had a QA person involved. And so for me, it's kind of like going from like one area of science into another. So it's quite sort of like, it's quite interesting. And there's so many opportunities for people like me. Like I say, you need empathy to be good at my role. You need to be able to kind of work with regulators, with external people, with the people doing the job, understand what's happening at the site as well, because you can't have a fixed way of doing things, because there's always people making mistakes or trying their best and failing, or trying their best and doing really well. So it's like, it's a real balance, and it's, you have to have a lot of interpersonal skills doing my job. And I really quite like it, because you're basically trying to support people doing their job correctly. And that's what I like about it, because you're not specifically working on one project, you're working with a lot of people, and you're trying across the board to do things really well. So that's where I got to where I am. you know, it's not an academic career. It's a really supportive career, I think. And you have quite a lot of exposure to quite a lot of research. So that's where I am. Thanks for inviting me, Rob. It's really great to be here today.
Well, you're welcome. In the clinical data sphere, do people use the term data steward? Because it's only really come about in the last couple of years.
Well, we have traditionally had data managers and trial managers, and data managers would be the people who you'd have trial assistants who would be the kind of admin people. You'd have the data managers who kind of the people who are collecting the data, doing lots of data cleaning before they hand it over to the statistician. But you don't really have data stewards per se, but you would have a data manager who basically is, you know, is like old currency basically. But data steward, I like that. I like that kind of name a bit more because, you know, it is about the whole sort of thing and being supportive as opposed to just like managing one small aspect of it. It's a bit more all-encompassing. Angus, nice to meet you.
Angus, how did you find yourself in your current role?
Robert, can I just add something?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say to Liz that the kind of role that you were doing, that is what I was looking for, because there used to be clinical trial data manager positions available, but they would never take you because if you had not done anything related with clinical data.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to kind of, it's like being an academic. You have to have papers to get grant funding. Like, you know, you've got to start somewhere though, haven't you?
Angus, how did you find yourself in your current role? So DCC have a large presence in UK and international stewardship, and I believe cross-domain as well. Am I right?
Yeah, I've been with DCC since 2007, so quite a long time. I was a postdoc for 10 years before that, working in well, I've got an information science background, and so I was working in a unit doing social informatics research in for mainly for local government. So I was looking for something a bit different, bit of a change, and saw this advert for a job trying to document and understand data practices that researchers had in different domains. So I applied for that and found myself talking to researchers about their data life cycle. At the time, DCC's kind of only resource was the curation life cycle and some risk management tools. So we're trying to understand what people wanted, how they reacted to the new data policies that were being discussed. And through that, we got some funding from GIST and the eScience program at the time to develop a program of support for UK institutions. So we work with quite a few across the UK, trying to develop RDM coordination roles. And so I kind of found a bit of tension in that work between people from a library background who were quite keen on bashing researchers over the head with principles and compliance, and my own kind of experience as a researcher, and particularly working in qualitative research, and thinking, oh, you need to start from where researchers are, and I think I don't call myself a data steward. I think I see the evolution of data stewardship is a really good thing, and it's research data management coordination with a budget to get people out into the actual teams, supporting them, and encouraging cross-domain exchange of skills and approaches. And so I've enjoyed more recently being part of various European projects that have been working to try and professionalize the role more and develop competence frameworks and capability models and stuff, and try to build more of a career structure and just encourage people to develop their skills more.
I think it's quite difficult though, isn't it? Because they're infrastructure roles and, they support multiple projects. I mean, I think we really struggle within academia to get funding for those roles that seem to kind of be a little bit of something to everybody. And nobody, within Wales, we have our healthcare providers are kind of rowing back, pulling away from providing infrastructure funding and wanting to create this kind of really kind of self-sufficient model, but that doesn't necessarily always work, especially when you're trying to educate people in the kind of really early stages of development and developing a research project. So how are you kind of trying to overcome that on a local kind of level, Angus? Because I think that's a really interesting discussion to have across institutions, how we can all kind of understand the importance of these roles within that really early stage when there's no funding, when that's when you have to lay down really good principles on how we're going to design research projects.
So can you repeat the question, Liz?
Sorry, it was quite wordy, wasn't it? I was wondering what you're doing within your institution to kind of understand the value of that really early stage and how to kind of quantify that and get the funding for those roles.
That's a good question. I actually, to be honest, I don't do that much within Edinburgh. I'm based in Edinburgh, but Edinburgh has its own open research team and RDM support role. So they go out and do more of that kind of coalface work than I do these days. I think partly as you probably know, data management planning has been quite a strong focus for DCC for quite a long time, and I think that approach of encouraging people to think through their project and the kinds of things that can go wrong and how they're going to make the most of their outputs at the end of the project. Those are the kinds of opening conversations I think that get people to think ahead about what they're going to do with their data and where the resource is going to come from to do that. I think for institutions, back around 10 years ago, there was there were a lot of questions about where you get the budget from, and I think I'm not sure, but I hope nowadays that it's just seen as something that institutions have to do, and that libraries have. I think it's become more common that the library is looked on as where that support sits. But
a lot of it comes down to kind of cultivating communities, though, doesn't it? And people feeling that they know how to reach out and get hold of those communities. Because people like myself, you know, you know, there's colleagues on the call here that I know. There's colleagues who are, you know, research data storage, and I think if you know those people, then you know where to go. But kind of forming those communities and giving like a platform for people to be able to reach out to look for that information is really important, especially when it comes to early career researchers. And also, like, I think there is a lot of emphasis on early career researchers, but there's also like those really experienced researchers who never put their hand up and go, I don't really know what I'm doing and I really need some help because I'm really responsible, but it's all changed since I started doing this. And I think that, you know, by giving really good tools to people, they don't have to like hold their hand up and embarrass themselves. They can just like see how to do it properly. And I think having good communities and having really good tools is really key to be able to kind of cultivate, you know, that kind of responsible attitude to how we're handling our data.
Yeah, there's a lot on research data man mailing list at the moment around DMPs and universities coming together and starting to say anything which is fundable needs to have a data management plan associated with it. We're kind of at that point where I think some universities are ready for this, some universities aren't ready for this. In fact, next month we've invited UCL to come and give a talk in this space, and they have a data steward group, quite a large one associated with their supercomputing. So we're asking the person who set it up how they actually set it up.
Oh, that's a nice idea.
That's one of the voices, or that's one of the themes that's coming out on research data man mailing list as well, which is how do you actually set these teams up?
I think there's a lot of groups, aren't there? And it's how to set them up so they like keep being in existence, because there's lots of groups and there's lots of Teams chats, aren't there? But it's like getting enough of a critical mass to be involved in that is always quite hard, isn't it? So yeah, it'd be good to know how they've done that, Rob. That'd be, you know, that is interesting. I think there's a lot of carrot and stick involved with data management as well, and the Information Commissioner's Office. So they're the guys who, you know, they're the regulatory body, like an independent body for, you know, for making sure that personal data in the UK is managed accordance with the Data Protection Act. And I came across this article that they wrote about, I don't know, last year sometime, and it's called The Ripple Effect. And that's there's a link to it. I think, Rob, we're going to circulate some slides afterwards. And it's really interesting about the kind of, when you do something wrong with human data, with like, you know, personally identifiable data. And like often people think, oh, I've sorted it now, it's absolutely fine. But the ICO spent quite a lot of time and money. They had this project, the Ripple project. So it's not like the Raspberry Ripple ice cream. It's like what happens to a real person if something happens to their data. So thank you. So they've got some like, you know, they've got some resources that are really good. So it's kind of a, like understanding, like I was saying previously about like empathizing with people when something's gone wrong. So it's horrendous as a person. I've done it myself. I did it the last couple of weeks, sent data to the wrong person, and like understanding that you have to put your hand up and say, oh, I did something really wrong is really scary. But, you know, the implications of not doing so are often really big. And for institutions, you know, they have to know about things when you've made mistakes. And it's, you know, it's so important to kind of take responsibility for, you know, things that have been done. And that's the carrot and the stick, really. Like, you know, you don't want to be hit by a big fat carrot or a big fat stick. And you don't want it to be like, you just want to kind of ingratiate this kind of like, I've done something wrong, I need to do something about it. But also after that, after you've sorted it, you kind of have to think about, you know, the actual impact on people. So say you've got some healthcare data. So say you've got a mental health care record with loads of like free text in it, for example. It's quite different data. So if you've just got like an X-ray, for example, of a broken leg, they both kind of fall into the kind of special category data according to GDPR. But kind of sometimes like free text data can be really, really, really sensitive. And so say some of that free text data went into the wild and it's got, you know, a patient and she was like She's beaten by her husband, for example, has been hospitalised a number of times, and they got a load of psychological, like that sort of data is really, you know, if that sort of data got into the wild and got into the wrong hands, the impact of that could actually have a negative impact on a real person in real time and have, you know, long-term impact on their life. So the ICO did this. There's a link within this slide of kind of understanding the kind of after effects of what you've done to try to prevent anything like that happening in the future, and understanding that the impact that it has on other people, and kind of committing to sorting things out and never actually doing it again. So I think that's quite a nice thing that the ICO have done. And the ICO, they're like a lot of regulatory bodies, we're quite scared of them, but they want to work with people who are doing research, who are kind of handling like personally identifiable data, so that you handle it properly and you are responsible for the data and you understand the implications of doing it right and doing it wrong. So I think that's one of those resources that I think is really good. Munazah, you've got your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so when you're talking about mistakes or errors that are being made, is it the ones that are introduced at the human level? And this sounded very health data and patient data, clinical data specific. So is it the ones that are people who are handling, data managers who are introducing these errors, I'm sure by mistake? So is that what you were addressing? And
Yeah, I mean,
does it implicate that there should be more automated processes so that such kind of errors do not happen, which have such big implications?
I think you can have, like, there is a reason to have some automated processes, but you know, all of these automated, they're still going to include a human. And often the mistakes that happen are you're sending information to one person, you don't check the subject line, the kind of the distribution line, and you send it to other people, and literally everybody does it. Like, you know, if people say they haven't done it, then they're lying. They're just completely
Even
unaware.
in common emails, we tend to forget to
Yeah,
check
all the
subject
time.
line. Yeah.
All the time. Yeah, and it just, you know, you might be just sending. I, a couple of weeks ago, sent a report to a colleague, two colleagues called Ellie, one in the NHS, one not in the NHS, and it wasn't the one I sent it to, but you know, that's, it happened. But you have to, you kind of put your hand up, you think, oh my gosh, what's the worst thing that can happen from this? Well, actually, it's not that bad. I'll get them to delete it. And you kind of, you go through a process of trying to sort it out and making sure you don't do it again. So now I will always be a lot more, you know, a lot better about checking who I'm sending emails to, because I don't want to embarrass myself and colleagues or release data out of the university that may necessarily not need to go out. So it's kind of like, you can automate stuff, but you can't automate everything. And it's all those things that you can't automate. That's where you got human, and we all make mistakes. And we just need a bit of empathy when we do things that are wrong.
Yeah, completely agree. When I was sort of asking people to be part of this panel, I emailed someone in UCL and got someone in Cardiff. I did it last week, and I didn't realise because they didn't get back to me. But yeah, always done. From your list here, Liz, what are your top two?
Oh, top two. I'd say I love a DPIA, and everybody's like, oh, what's a data protection impact assessment? But that's like, it's like assessing risks associated with the sharing of personal information, and people get really intimidated by it. And the data protection and the AI number, so it's 3 and 4 are quite similar. It's from the ICO. It's a working document and trying to get people to take responsibility for their bits of a process, the bits that they can control, the bits that they can understand, and working with other colleagues for the other bits in the process, so that somebody can come in and understand the entire process. So say you were audited by an external body or a funder or something, they can understand the decisions that were made as to how that data, that sensitive, personally identifiable data is handled, how it's handled appropriately, how it's documented, who's made changes to it, how you can understand what those changes are, and how you can kind of cause, like understand from point A to point B what's happened to that data, how you sourced it, and how it's ended up in your analysis, and what the risks are of kind of handling that data. And you know, there's like people think about risks and they always think about the scary things with risks as if it always go wrong, but also within within research there's also a massive risk of not doing anything. There's like an ethical kind of thing about that as well. Like, you know, if you can do analysis and you can come up with something new, then you really should, because it might have a really positive impact on patients as well. So a DPIA kind of assesses all of that, and it allows you to kind of justify these risks, because on balance it's actually in the interests of the patients, for example. So I love a DPIA, and I went to a meeting last week with a load of data professionals in Cardiff, and I was like, oh, I was with my people, they're all data professionals, and it was like, you know, a safe space for geekiness. And you know, like everyone in that room, there are about 80 of us, we all love the DPIA because it gets people to kind of really take responsibility for things and understand things, and like you keep it live, you keep it current, and if things change you update it, and you know, if there's any problems you kind of update it again. It's a really good document. Number 1 on the list is a really good one. That's kind of someone who's like dipping their toe into clinical trials, and often like people might start, you get typically you'd get a chief investigator or a clinician who just thinks, I've got my question, I'll get some data, I'll do some analysis, I got some results, I'll get a new drug out of it. And it's so much more complicated than that. And this link here takes you to the clinical trials toolkit, and it's like a London tube map of start, middle and end, with all the bits in it and all the kind of resources and anything like that's relative to ethics and clinical trials regulations. And that is a fantastic resource, and it's probably about 15 years old now, and I think it's an amazing resource, and I think everybody should have like an equivalent for how their systems work within their institution. I think it's brilliant.
Who wrote that clinical trials toolkit?
It was a project between the MRC and the Department of Health, and it was back in about, gosh, 2010. It's really old. It's really old, but it's brilliant, and it's on the HRA website now.
I saw something, I think, coming from the Netherlands as well, where they've adopted a metro map. I forget what the tool is. I think it's around. I think the name has metro in it, and again, it's for the stages within stewardship.
Yeah, sorry, it's on the NIHR website. It's really good. Like you click on it. I mean, I adopted something similar when I worked in the trials unit for all our SOPs. So kind of show, you know, because often with research projects, you know, it's clinical trials, for example, they're so long-winded. They can take 5-7 years, and it's often that staff aren't going to start on it, working on it at the start and go all the way through. And people kind of come in at various bits, and you need to know what's relevant to you at that time. And so it's really good that you can dip in and dip out and work out what, you know, what the current requirements are for it. Yeah, I mean, all the links here are really good, and understanding how AI relates to medical devices is really important. I'll put in another link as well for that. I think just being able to immerse yourself in something regulatory, and even if you're just doing a bit of data management, data stewardship, but understanding the wider picture of how things are evolving, and that's why there's so many. And I appreciate there's quite a lot in there, but it's all the things we love, Robert. So I love a lot. It's a good time of year for it.
So what we're going to do, Liz, is after this call, I'm going to put these links into a spreadsheet. So what I'm doing within chat at the moment is sharing a spreadsheet with everyone on the call. If people are encouraged to log in and also put in the tools or the resources or the training or whatever resources that they actually use within their job as well. I put some in just from ELIXIR, and people are adding to this now, so we're
Brilliant.
But that's great. And Munazah, you have here a couple of things, which is RDM kits and also the Data Steward Handbook.
Yeah, so as you know, this was one of my first endeavors when I joined the team, the recent job that I'm at with data management. So we started this toolkit, which is the research data management toolkit, which most of you might have heard about. And this was like at the peak of COVID, we started this toolkit, and there was a lot of enthusiasm from people who came forward and contributed to this tool. Which told us later on that it was not just that we were looking for a common cause to work for during that very highly stressful time, but everybody had recognized by then that we need something like this, that at least gives us a kickstart where to start from if we have to do data management. Because simply jumping onto a data management plan, people were not clear. They were just trying to, because when the universities or funding agencies were pushing them towards providing a data management plan, people were not clear, what does it even mean? What does it entail? Why am I supposed to do this? And even as part of my first job where I spent 6 months, it was very hard to convince PIs to spend any kind of money into or time to budget these kind of requirements that will come out of data management plans. So this toolkit was a great start in that direction, and obviously we have grown since. It's providing, our aim was to make it like best practices and guidelines, keep it for people to start that what is data management? Why do I need to do it? Why bother? What is it going to be? What is in it for me? Like you said, Liz, carrot and sticks. So what am I going to do with it? Why am I bothered? But interestingly, also, what makes me often laugh about it is people now who are writing data management plans, sometimes they really lift off the text from RDM Kit, put it in their data management plans, which I don't mind at all, because they read it and they see how it fits to their data that is going to be produced from their kind of experiment and from their kind of research, which is perfectly fine. Even if it is serving that purpose, they still are exploring what they should be doing or why they should be doing, why they should be, doing these things that will make their data better, or what is it going to give them in the end. Especially when I was a bioinformatician, I was doing a lot of analysis of the next-gen sequencing data. And when you had to upload the next-gen sequencing data to the repositories, as a researcher, it felt such a waste of time, because there were these endless spreadsheets that you were filling, and then you were going back to your data files, naming them again so that they are readable and understandable. So even when I was doing them as a bioinformatician, I had my own naming system, I had created my own convention, a file name convention, that I would name all my FASTQ files in a certain way, name all my BAM files in a certain way, and name all of those, which technically was, as I was answering Eva, was what I should have been doing to follow the FAIR principles. So if people recognize that if they are even going through one page of RDM Kit and reading why metadata is important, in the end, when you're uploading your data to your repositories, you don't have to put in so much effort and time. I remember I had like loads of data sets, and we had done really deep end sequencing, and there were endless number of files. And to put that Excel sheet of, especially if you're submitting it to the GEO, I think NCBI is I think ENA and Array Express are still friendlier. GEO is still, you're doing it, it might have changed now, but you were doing through a spreadsheet, which was horrendous, and it was awful to look at the amount of fields, and then it would go on becoming longer and longer. So I think if you're prepared mentally from the beginning, and if you go through all of these stages of data management, or keeping it just in your mind, you don't have to do a lot basically. You just have to organize yourself better. Just name your files in a certain way, add metadata, add README files, which I think bioinformaticians already do. But for the experimental people, if they do all of this, it saves a lot of time in the end when they are submitting this data. So from that point of view, Dataman RDM Kit is a great help. For a beginner, especially like somebody who is new to, let's say an undergrad student who's just starting his education. So it would be very good to be this, for this to be a part of his curricula, that I also have to keep data management in my mind. Yeah, so for me, it's we also, as an editor, we keep going back to it, and every time I read something and I feel, oh, this should have been in an easier way, or this does not sound right. So we go back and keep correcting it. So it's also a work in progress. It's not set in stone, because we also see a lot of changes, a lot of formats, a lot of standards, a lot of metadata standards keep changing or evolving and progressing. So we also have to keep up to date with that. So we try to do all of that.
Yeah, it's the thing I use, I think, most frequently, actually, certainly when people ask me questions about stuff. I mean, file naming is a really big one. And in fact, there's a couple of training pieces I've put into these spreadsheets which have kind of lessons on how to name the files and organize directories. But what I really like about RDM Kit is this word aggregator keeps coming out. It kind of pulls everything together. So there'll be a page on provenance, for example, and then there'll be parts linking out to training, parts linking out to resources, and there'll be, you know, a layperson's definition, and then the technical wording would actually come. I love it.
But I
there's also
also,
DS Ham.
just
Go
one
on.
thing I want to add is, I fought a lot. So if you see on the landing page of RDM Kit, there is a data lifecycle wheel, which was inspired by the JISC wheel. And at some point we were wanting to get rid of it, but I really fought hard for it to be kept in, because to me, I think anybody who comes for the first time to research data management or to think of it from a holistic point of view, this life cycle is very, very helpful to get them a view of why we are doing it. Why do I need to be bothered about research data management at all? And the second thing that I've put in there is the Data Stewardship Handbook, which is still a work in progress and is being written on, but it is very different from Data Management RDM Toolkit. It is a guide and helpful for data stewards, because we as a group of data managers or data stewards, we have different names, whatever you call us. When we come together, if there's a new person joining, there is no handbook to guide them. That what is it that is expected from you? What are you supposed to do? What is your role? Whether are you looking into policy? Are you looking into provenance? Are you looking into actual research data? What is it that is expected of you, and what is it you might encounter during this role? So this is why this idea, we figured out that there is no handbook or a guide for data stewards, because it's still a relatively new and very fluid kind of a position. I might be called a data manager, but I do a lot more community management than data management. So it's very fluid. My role changes from day to day. If somebody asks me, what is your major role? I cannot explain. So we wanted to have this handbook which can get people started. So this will cover things like even use cases of what you might come across, what is expected of you. So I think this is going to be a very useful resource for new data managers and data stewards, or even if you're thinking or of going into direction. We were also looking into like what is a career progression in this data manager's life, which I think is a question that should be addressed now. So hopefully in the next few months, there'll be more content in it and there'll be more work on it, which is being continuously worked on via small content-a-thons and hackathons. So we'll have more content there.
I think that's great, Munazah. I think I think people are really quite willing to learn about this sort of stuff. I think you kind of step into an arena, you want to learn. I think there is a point, there's like a sweet spot of getting people to learn about stuff though. And like generally when you've kind of been seen to be doing a job for a while, the perception is that you should know everything there is to know about everything, and the ability to kind of spend time learning depletes a bit, but it's really evolving all the time. You know, the techniques we use, the data that we use, everything that we integrate, the expectations, how funders are expecting us to kind of make our data reusable and available. It evolves with time. And I think that kind of having a handbook that's live and that people can kind of use, you know, regardless of how long they've been doing a job is really important, because you know, you're never going to know everything to know that there is to know about everything. You step you know into a slightly different area of research and you're back to square naught again. And I think having handbooks, you could have those across the board in so many different roles. You know, you could have them for chief investigators, for example, because you know, you get early stage chief investigators. Maybe you should develop this then, Rob, like just, you know, they kind of like, they've got a clinical path they've got to follow, and they want to get, you know, to registrar or whatever, or consultant, whatever they want to be. And they've got to do a bit of research. So they like start doing something, and they've got a lot of responsibility, and they haven't got the first idea of what to do. And it's something that we've been looking at in clinical trials for a long time, like setting out what the expectations are, because in a clinical trial, there's like legal expectations, like a legal requirement for them to be responsible for what's happening, and they don't even know. They just think, oh, I've just got to get up the next rung of the ladder, and I'll do a project on it. And it's quite far from you know, it's a very steep learning curve for them. And if you can help people, then brilliant. And if they cannot make mistakes, even better. And if they can learn off the mistakes of others and never do those mistakes themselves, then that's fantastic, isn't it? That's you know, that's what research is about. That's what working in this community is about.
Yeah, I mean, these are lovely because they're curated by practitioners. So my understanding, Munazah, it all goes through an editorial board, but the encouragement is that people that know, or they go, oh, this is my bit, I know how to do this. They write their piece, and then
Yeah.
So it is, so when we work together, all of us are somehow, or whatever our role is, we are engaged in data management and data stewardship in our everyday roles. So we know the practical problems that a data steward or a data manager would face, and the solutions that we have worked out so far. That is why we'll do use cases. So that's going to be, so use case will be a practical solution to a practical problem.
Yeah, it's really good. It takes a village, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it takes a village. And also, when we are doing this, it's just not bringing up this data stewardship handbook, it's also building the community. We know who to reach out to. Even if we know one person from that group, we can reach out to, hey, can you guide me about this? And then, you know, it's like helping otherwise as well, irrespective of the data stewardship handbook.
Yeah.
when do you think there'll be a first iteration of the handbook? I won't keep you to this, but what?
No, I think we are trying to do another content-a-thon, and there is a lot of content there which is not on the website right now. Some of the content that we have is not there yet, so let's give it 6 months.
So,
yeah.
So can you still see my slide? We've got Angus.
Yeah, it looks good.
Sounds like a fantastic resource, actually. I mean, the RDM kit is excellent, and there's lots of Elixir things that are really good and that we've recommended in our work and in the European projects. And I've when I was asked to think of 3 things, I thought, well, I can obviously do a bit of self-promotion because I've been fortunate being able to be involved in the first 2 of those anyway. The minimum viable skill sets is it's in an idea that came out of the skills for EOS project that I'm involved in, and what we've done there is develop these role profiles for data stewards and various other roles like early career researcher, senior researcher, research infrastructure person, and various others. And in some of these cases, we haven't. Well, we said we wouldn't reinvent the wheel. We would work with what was already there. In some cases, there's been quite a lot of work already on developing competence frameworks that are great, but sometimes you have to kind of take a week off just to read them through and make sense of them. And we wanted something that was much more distilled and kind of a bridge between those kinds of things and the reports about skills that different roles need and actual training courses and training materials. So they're short and set out what we think are essential skills and competencies, including soft skills that you mentioned, Liz, are really important.
So typically, how many people are working on the MVSs? I always sort of wonder how many people are sort of defining these and writing the documents. What does the back team?
So each of the roles, we put together a small team. So the data steward one was led by Nida van Leersum in TU Delft. I guess you know, Technical University of Delft have had a big data steward team, and we're one of the first in Europe to establish that. And so they led it, and they also involved the Dutch Data Steward Network, and there's also involvement from we've had colleagues from Finland and Wales, Greece. It's a big European project, but generally around half dozen people have been involved in writing it, and we've consulted with other groups that can, you know, give us feedback and help make it better. So it's still going on. When our next iteration will be out in April, and we're quite keen to see how you might be used elsewhere, and so really keen actually to see if they might help with the data steward handbook and vice versa, you know, because we want to see how they can be more effective than they already are. So the other thing there is Acme Fair was a model that we developed in the Fair's Fair project, and it was more trying to answer the question, what can the organization do to support data stewards individually and their community development role. And so it's one of these capability models that has a scale for maturity. It also has a scale for community engagement, and we try to balance both of those things, and look at different kind of life cycle stages that a support service has to help people with. So that's on Synodo. It's been quite good take up, I think, and it's been used in the successor project Fair Impact quite successfully, I think. So there's links to them there, and keen to know what people think of them. The other thing here was it's more resource that I've found helpful just in talking to people about how these very kind of generic concepts like reproducibility fit with different practices and different perspectives, because you know, not everyone uses an experimental approach, and not everyone uses stats to work out whether the results are valid or not. And so there are other kind of quality and value considerations that people in different domains use. And Sabina Leonelli is a philosopher of science, I think, and she was at Exeter doing work on life sciences, and you may all have heard of her. If you haven't, I'd certainly encourage you to look at her work, because although she's a philosopher, and you expect philosophers to come up with insightful stuff, you don't always expect them to come up with stuff that's really practical and helpful on a day-to-day basis. And I've found her work really helpful.
That's great.
So yeah, that's my 3 things.
I'll definitely take a look. Thank you, Angus.
That was great. Thank you. We're coming towards the end of the call at the moment. I mean, there's various things in chat that I think have been addressed as we've actually gone along. Yeah, thank you to everyone that's put information into the resources spreadsheet that we're doing. So we'll leave those links in the minutes. We'll take a look and we'll add the extra ones that we've had off this call as well. So I hope everyone's found that useful in terms of what they're signposts. There's, I would say, at least 50% of what's actually been put up I've not heard of before. Really, really nice around signposting. Where do you find your new stuff? I mean, if something new comes along, where do you generally hear about it? Is it from colleagues or a mailing list or a conference or a meeting? How do you know these things exist?
I find some really interesting people on LinkedIn, actually. There's a guy, he's called DPO Daily, and he's like a data protection person. So a lot of it is like banking and insurance and stuff that's totally irrelevant. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's practical, kind of. It's really interesting to see how people have done things wrong. He doesn't really like John Edwards, the information commissioner, at all. He's got very negative things to say about him. But he does kind of like, yeah, there's quite a lot of interesting stuff on there. Like, you know, people are quite happy to post stuff that they've done. I think from a regulatory perspective, I think it's an HRA as well. They, you know, they're quite, you know, prolific with the stuff that they put on as well. Yeah, that's where I kind of look, basically. I think everyone's kind of quite keen to learn. I think it's been great, this has, because everyone's learning about stuff, and like, and we're all quite keen to know new stuff about all of this, aren't we? So yeah, I'm sure there's loads of places to look. Where do you look, Munazah, for things?
I don't know, but I think because we're so involved in this ELIXIR network and so many other European projects, so something keeps coming up from somewhere. So I usually reach out to people. I'm not very active on LinkedIn, so I don't go there, but I reach out to people I know. Can you help me with this? Do you know about this? It's a huge network of people, thanks to ELIXIR and some of the EOS projects. So my way is, after the Google search, my next thing is to go to people.
The EOS work is so interesting. It's really high level. When I'm part of a task force, and it's very, very high level, sort of mapping data sets across disciplines is one of the things.
But the people usually are the same people. It's kind of this group of people who are everywhere. So they give you different perspectives of the same problem because they are involved in so many projects, so many initiatives. So somehow it's the usual suspects.
That's interesting.
The research data man mailing list, I think that's where I hear about things first. You can hear trends as well. So many institutions and universities are using this, and this is where I'm getting a sense that the DMP, data management plan, is starting to come through. I think there's probably movement on that. There's some vocal people. I think it's where I look to invite people into this group to speak, and I think we could probably do something with data management plans. What was I going to say? Oh yes, we're just going to get a program for this year. So we've got, I think, 9 to 10 talks timetabled for this coming year. So We're just going to talk our chairs in a couple of weeks' time and get that up onto the website so that people can start to get this into their calendar. We've got some nice things coming up this year. Thank you very much, everyone.